The wire stretches endlessly into the fog. February 1945, somewhere in Louisiana. The compound sits heavy under low clouds, rows of wooden barracks bleeding into grey morning light. Guard towers loom at the corners. Floodlights cut white cones through the mist. A truck engine growls in the distance. Obergefreiter Klaus Hartmann stands behind the wire, hands shoved deep into his pockets. 23 years old. Hollow cheeks, uniform still caked with North African sand despite 2 months in captivity. He hasn't slept well since the surrender. None of them have. The other men gather near the fence. 50, maybe 60. They don't speak. They watch the truck roll through the main gate, canvas tarp pulled tight over the bed. It stops near the mess hall. American soldiers drop the tailgate. Hartmann squints. Wooden crates, stacked high. Stamped letters he can't read from this distance. A sergeant waves them forward. The prisoners move slowly, boots scuffing dirt. They've learned not to expect much. Thin soup, stale bread, sometimes meat that tastes like cardboard. The Americans start unloading. Hartmann sees the first bottle emerge from a crate. Dark glass, curved. A red label catches the light. Another prisoner whispers beside him, "Was ist das?" Hartmann doesn't answer. He's staring at the next crate being opened. White cartons, dozens of them. The Americans are smiling now, handing them out like it's nothing. One of the guards catches his eye. Young kid. Maybe 19. He's holding a bottle in one hand, ice cream in the other. The guard grins. Hartmann feels something crack inside his chest. Not anger, not relief, disbelief. They were told America was starving. That's what the propaganda said, what the officers repeated, what everyone believed because believing otherwise meant questioning everything. In the trenches of Tunisia, in the bunkers of Normandy, in the frozen forests where they retreated step by bloody step, the story stayed the same. Germany fights against a broken empire, a nation of weaklings and Jews, a country on its knees. The prisoners arriving at American camps in 1944 and 1945 carried that belief like a second uniform. They expected prison camps to reflect a struggling nation, bare rations, crumbling infrastructure, guards too tired or too hungry to care. They expected something closer to what they'd seen back home, cities bombed to rubble, children with sunken eyes, old men pulling carts because there was no fuel left. They did not expect ice cream. The first waves came from North Africa. Rommel's Afrika Korps, once legendary, now sunburned and beaten. They surrendered in Tunisia by the thousands in May 1943, then Sicily, then Italy. Each defeat fed more men into the American prison system. They arrived by ship, packed into holds, seasick, exhausted, some still wearing tropical uniforms in the middle of winter. The crossing took weeks, North Atlantic swells, cold that bit through wool. At night, they heard the destroyers circling overhead, sonar pinging in the dark. When they finally saw American soil, it looked wrong, too clean, too whole. The ports bustled with activity, cranes swinging cargo. Trucks lined up for miles, warehouses stacked with crates, everything moving with mechanical efficiency. No bomb craters, no ruins, no signs of a nation at war on its own territory. Lieutenant Friedrich Weber stepped off a transport ship in Norfolk, Virginia, in November 1943. He'd fought in North Africa for 2 years, lost half his weight, watched friends die from dysentery, shrapnel, heat stroke. The surrender felt like relief at first, then the voyage, then this. He stood on the dock, wrists bound, and stared at the rows of new vehicles parked along the waterfront. Jeeps, trucks, half-tracks, all of them gleaming, painted, maintained. A guard gestured him forward with a rifle. "Move it, Fritz." Weber moved, but his eyes stayed on the vehicles. They loaded the prisoners onto trains, not boxcars, passenger cars, with seats. The windows weren't barred. Some men sat in silence, staring out at the American countryside rolling past. Others couldn't stop looking. Farms, towns, highways, everything intact, everything functioning. Feldwebel Otto Becker pressed his forehead against the glass somewhere in Georgia. He counted the cars on the road, civilian cars, dozens of them, moving freely, burning gasoline like it didn't matter. Back home, his mother wrote letters about the rationing. 200 grams of bread per day, 50 grams of meat per week if you were lucky, coal shortages, no coffee, no chocolate, no soap. Here, the roads were full. The trains rolled deeper into the interior, past cities that showed no damage, past factories that glowed at night with production, past fields that stretched to the horizon, heavy with crops. The camps themselves shattered the last illusions. Camp Alva, Oklahoma. Camp Hearn, Texas. Camp Ruston, Louisiana. Camp Clinton, Mississippi. Over 400 camps scattered across the American heartland, some massive compounds holding thousands, others small work camps tucked into farmland. They were built fast. Wooden barracks laid out in grids, mess halls, latrines, medical facilities, surrounding it all, wire, guard towers, floodlights, but inside something the prisoners didn't expect. Order, cleanliness, space. The barracks had bunks, real bunks with mattresses, blankets, pillows. Each man got a footlocker. The floors were wood, not dirt. Windows let in light. Stoves provided heat in winter. Gefreiter Ernst Müller walked into his assigned barracks at Camp McCain, Mississippi, in January 1944. He set his pack down slowly, looked around, counted 20 beds, plenty of room, no overcrowding, no stench of unwashed bodies packed too tight. He sat on the bunk. The mattress gave under his weight. He'd been sleeping on frozen ground for 6 months. The latrines had running water, showers, hot water even, if you got there at the right time. Toilets that flushed, sinks, mirrors. In the hospitals, German doctors treated German patients. The Americans provided supplies, medicine, bandages, anesthesia. They set bones, treated infections, performed surgeries. Men who expected to die from wounds instead recovered, but nothing prepared them for the food. The mess hall doors opened at noon. Camp Concordia, Kansas, March 1944. 300 prisoners filed in, boots scraping concrete. Long tables stretched the length of the hall, benches on either side. Steam rose from the serving line at the far end. Hartmann joined the line. Tin tray in hand, he kept his face neutral, expected the usual, watery stew, bread hard enough to break teeth. The first server dropped a ladle of stew onto his tray. Thick, brown, chunks of actual meat floating in it. Hartmann stared. The next server added potatoes, real potatoes, boiled, buttered, then bread, white bread, soft, fresh, then vegetables, carrots, beans, then a piece of meat, a full piece, beef, grilled. Hartmann's hand trembled slightly as he took the tray. He walked to a table, sat, looked down at the food. Around him, other men did the same. Nobody ate immediately, they just looked. One prisoner picked up the beef, turned it over, smelled it. Another poked the bread with his finger, testing if it was real. Somewhere down the table someone laughed. Not joy, hysteria. Feldwebel Hans Kruger sat across from Hartmann, 31 years old, veteran of Poland, France, Russia. He'd watched his units starve in the Caucasus, watched them eat leather, watched them die. He cut into the beef. Mein Gott! They ate slowly, carefully, like the food might vanish if they moved too fast. Some men cried while they ate, others just chewed in silence, faces blank. The portions were massive by their standards, more than they'd seen in years, more than their families back home would see in a month, and this was standard, every day. 3 meals, breakfast brought eggs, bacon, sometimes pancakes, coffee, real coffee, not the acorn substitute they'd choked down in the Wehrmacht. Lunch brought meat, vegetables, bread, soup. Dinner brought more of the same. The caloric intake met Geneva Convention standards, 2,800 calories per day, for working prisoners 3,000. The Americans measured it, tracked it, enforced it. In Germany, civilians were surviving on 1,500, sometimes less. The prisoners gained weight rapidly. Men who'd arrived skeletal filled out within weeks. Cheeks grew rounder, uniforms fit tighter, skin regained colour. Weber stood in the shower one morning and looked down at his body, ribs still visible, but less pronounced. His arms had muscle again. He felt strong, stronger than he'd felt in 2 years. It made no sense. They were prisoners. Prisoners were supposed to suffer. That's what war meant. That's what capture meant. But the Americans fed them like valued livestock. The reason was practical, not compassionate. The Geneva Convention required it. America signed the treaty. America followed the treaty. Not out of kindness, out of calculation. Treat enemy prisoners well, your own prisoners might be treated well, maintain standards, project strength, and America had the capacity. Agricultural output had exploded during the war, mechanized farming, fertilizers, hybrid crops. The Great Plains became the breadbasket of the Allied war effort. Meat production soared, dairy production soared, American citizens rationed, yes, But rationing in America meant less butter, not starvation. The prisoners saw the surplus firsthand. Camp kitchens threw away food, leftover stew dumped into bins, stale bread fed to pigs, spoiled milk poured into drains. Muller watched a cook scrape an entire pot of beans into the trash one evening. Beans nobody wanted, beans that would have fed his entire village for a week. He turned away. The dissonance grew sharper when the luxuries appeared. The Coca-Cola truck arrived on a Tuesday. Camp Shelby, Mississippi, June 1944. Hot, humid, the kind of heat that turned uniforms into wet rags by noon. The truck rolled through the gate, red logo painted on the side. The prisoners working the ground stopped, leaned on shovels, watched. American soldiers unloaded crates, glass bottles, hundreds of them. They set up a table near the canteen, put the bottles on ice, actual ice. A corporal waved the prisoners over. Line up, one per man. They lined up, slowly, suspicious. Hartman took a bottle, cold, wet with condensation. He held it like a grenade. The corporal grinned. Open it, Fritz, it ain't gonna bite. Hartman twisted the cap. Gas hissed. He sniffed it, sweet, sharp. He drank. The carbonation hit his throat like electricity. Sugar flooded his mouth. Cold burned his teeth. He swallowed, blinked. Scheisse. The prisoner next to him took a sip, then another, then drained the bottle in 3 long pulls. All down the line men drank, some smiled, some laughed, some just stood there, holding empty bottles, staring at nothing. Coca-Cola became a fixture, not daily, not even weekly, but regular enough. The Americans handed it out like candy, treated it like it was nothing. For the prisoners, it was everything. Soda didn't exist in Germany anymore. Sugar was rationed to near nothing. Bottled drinks were a memory from before the war, and here, in a prison camp, in the middle of nowhere, the enemy handed it out for free. Then came the ice cream. The first time nobody believed it. Camp Ruston, Louisiana, August 1944. The mess hall served dinner. Standard fare, meat, potatoes, vegetables. Then the servers brought out trays, white cartons, small, printed labels, ice cream. The prisoners stared. One man picked up a carton, opened it, stared at the pale frozen mass inside. Das ist nicht möglich. But it was. Vanilla, chocolate, sometimes strawberry, delivered by the truckload, made in factories pumping out millions of gallons for the military. The American war machine ran on industrial-scale ice cream production. Aircraft carriers had ice cream makers installed. Ships had ice cream served at meals. Bases stockpiled it, and the surplus went to prison camps. The prisoners ate slowly, let it melt on their tongues. Some hadn't tasted ice cream in 5 years. Some had never tasted it at all. Kruger sat with his carton unopened, just held it, felt the cold seep into his palms. His daughter was 7 years old. He hadn't seen her in 3 years. She'd never tasted ice cream, probably never would. He opened the carton, ate it, hated every bite. The canteen sold other luxuries: cigarettes, chocolate bars, candy, razor blades, soap, toothpaste. Prisoners earned scrip through work details, 80 cents per day. They spent it on things that hadn't existed in Germany since 1942. Some camps had beer, real beer, brewed locally, sold at the canteen for a dime. Some camps had sports equipment, footballs, baseballs, volleyballs. The Americans encouraged recreation, built fields, organised leagues, let the prisoners play. Some camps had libraries, thousands of books, German language, English language, technical manuals, novels, poetry. Some camps had musical instruments, pianos, guitars, violins. Prisoners formed orchestras, performed concerts. The Americans attended. At Camp Concordia, a prisoner named Joseph constructed a miniature replica of a German village using scrap wood. Spent 6 months on it. Buildings, streets, churches. The Americans photographed it, put it in the local newspaper. The disconnect became unbearable. Letters from home described devastation, cities reduced to ash, bombing raids nightly, food riots, black markets, children begging, mothers trading jewellery for bread. Letters to home described 3 meals a day, ice cream, movies, football games. The prisoners stopped writing details, just wrote, "I am well, I am fed, I am safe." They knew how it sounded. Some refused to believe the letters from home, thought they were propaganda, thought the Reich was lying to make them feel better about captivity. Others refused to believe their own eyes, thought the Americans were staging elaborate deceptions. that the food and luxuries were temporary, that reality would return soon. But the food kept coming, the ice cream kept coming, reality was already here. The work details left camp every morning. Trucks carried prisoners into the surrounding countryside, farms, orchards, lumber mills, food processing plants. The American economy was hemorrhaging labour, 16 million men in uniform, factories running triple shifts, fields understaffed. The prisoners filled the gap. They picked cotton in Texas, harvested wheat in Kansas, cut timber in Oregon, canned vegetables in California. For 80 cents a day they performed the labour that kept the American war machine fed and supplied, and they saw the abundance up close. Weber worked a farm in Nebraska, cornfields stretching to the horizon. The farmer owned 3 tractors, 3 new ones. He owned trucks, owned equipment, owned a house with electricity and running water. The farmer's wife brought lunch to the fields, sandwiches, ham, cheese, lettuce, tomatoes, lemonade. She smiled at the prisoners. "You'll work hard. Eat up." Weber ate, watched the woman drive away in a car that probably cost more than his father earned in a decade. At night, back in camp, the prisoners talked. Some grew angry, bitter. How could Germany win against this? Against a nation so wealthy it fed its enemies ice cream? Others grew resigned. The war was already lost. They'd known it, deep down, since Stalingrad, since North Africa, since the skies over the Reich filled with bombers. But seeing America made it undeniable. A few grew hopeful. If this was the enemy, maybe defeat wasn't the end. Maybe the world after Germany's collapse wouldn't be the apocalypse they'd been promised. The Nazi prisoners rejected all of it. Every camp had them. Diehards, true believers, men who wore their loyalty like armour. They refused to work, refused to cooperate, formed secret committees, enforced discipline on other prisoners. At Camp Tonkawa, Oklahoma, a prisoner named Johannes Kunze was beaten to death by fellow inmates. His crime? Cooperating with the Americans, sharing information. 5 men held him down while others took turns. Fists, boots, rocks. The Americans investigated, arrested 6 prisoners, tried them, executed 2. The message was clear. Loyalty to the Reich persisted, even here, even surrounded by wire and ice cream, but the majority just waited for news from home, waited for the war to end, waited to see what came next. The news trickled in slowly. Newspapers, radio broadcasts. Some camps allowed prisoners to listen, others didn't. D-Day, June 1944, the invasion of France. The prisoners heard and felt nothing. Relief? Dread? Both? The Bulge. December 1944, Germany's last offensive. It failed. They knew it would. Bombs falling on Berlin, Hamburg, Dresden. The letters from home stopped coming, or arrived months late. Always the same. Hunger, fear, ruin. The prisoners in America gained weight, played volleyball, ate ice cream. The cognitive dissonance became a kind of madness. Hartmann lay on his bunk one night, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in Germany, his brother was fighting, maybe already dead. His mother was starving. His city was burning. He'd eaten steak for dinner. He rolled over, faced the wall. Outside, the floodlights hummed. May 1945, Germany surrendered. The news reached the camps in waves. Some heard it from guards, others from newspapers, a few from prisoners who'd secretly kept radios. Silence followed. Not celebration, not grief, just silence. At Camp McCain, the prisoners gathered in the yard. Someone had a German flag, old, faded, smuggled through the entire journey. They raised it on a makeshift pole, then lowered it. Nobody spoke. The war was over. Germany was destroyed. The Reich was ash, and they were still here, in America, eating better than they ever had, sleeping in clean bunks, safe. Guilt set in like a fever. Why them? Why were they alive and fed while millions died? What did survival mean when it came at the cost of watching your nation collapse from across an ocean, powerless, stuffed with ice cream? Some wanted to go home immediately, didn't care what waited, just wanted to see it, face it. Others dreaded it, knew there was nothing left. No jobs, no homes, no future. Repatriation took time, months, years. The Americans needed the labour, kept the prisoners working, kept paying them, kept feeding them. In 1946, the camps started emptying. Ships carried prisoners back across the Atlantic, back to Germany. They arrived in a wasteland, rubble, shortages, chaos, occupation zones dividing the country, refugees everywhere, famine, disease. Hartmann returned to Hamburg in September 1946. His street didn't exist anymore. Just craters. Broken walls. He found his mother living in a cellar. 60 pounds. Hollow eyes. She cried when she saw him. Couldn't stop touching his face. You're so healthy. He didn't tell her about the ice cream. Weber returned to Munich, found his wife, his son. They'd survived barely. His wife asked about the camp. Was it terrible? He lied. Yes. Some prisoners stayed in America, applied for visas, found work, married, built new lives. The country that imprisoned them became home. Others returned to Germany and never spoke of the camps, buried the memory, the abundance, the guilt. A few wrote memoirs decades later, tried to explain the impossible paradox, how they lived through the war as prisoners and ate better than kings, how they survived, and it felt like a betrayal.